Welcome back to your ultimate pit stop, Piston Pundit. Trade wars usually center on oil pipelines, EV batteries, or semiconductor fabs, but this time, the spotlight shifts to wheat. In early 2026, renewed tariff tensions between Washington and Ottawa turned agricultural trade into a strategic chess move. What looked like routine brinkmanship quickly exposed how deeply integrated North American supply chains really are. And just like in the automotive world, when one specialized component faces disruption, the entire system feels the tremor. Here's how this wheat showdown unfolded, and why the ripple effects reach far beyond the Farm Belt. Tariff Flashpoint. Wheat becomes trade weapon. The escalation began when tariff pressure resurfaced on Canadian exports in late 2025 and intensified into early 2026. While steel, aluminum, and industrial goods initially dominated headlines, agriculture soon entered the arena. Wheat became a focal point, not because the United States lacks production capacity, but because certain Canadian grades serve a specialized role. Canada supplies high-protein spring wheat and premium durum varieties that American mills use to fine-tune flour blends for bread and pasta. Contrary to viral claims, Canada does not provide the majority of U.S. wheat consumption. The United States remains a major global producer. However, specific Canadian grades have been woven into American milling systems for decades under NAFTA and USMCA integration. Even modest tariffs introduce friction into what was engineered for seamless cross-border flow. But the real issue isn't just tariffs themselves, it's whether those specialized imports can realistically be replaced. Critical grain reality. Why replacement isn't simple. Not all wheat performs the same. Protein content, gluten strength, and milling behavior determine how flour behaves under heat and pressure. Much like octane ratings influence combustion efficiency inside an engine cylinder. Canadian Western Red Spring wheat is valued for its higher protein levels, which enhance dough elasticity and structural integrity. By contrast, much of American winter wheat carries lower protein averages. For mills calibrated to produce consistent premium blends, those differences are critical. Facilities are optimized around predictable grain characteristics, supply reliability, and logistical timing. Adjusting sourcing isn't instantaneous. Acreage shifts require planting cycles. Soil chemistry and climate cannot be replicated overnight. Saskatchewan and Manitoba specialize in precisely the varieties many U.S. processors rely on. When that flow encounters disruption, costs and complexity inevitably rise. Before we delve deeper, do us a favor and smash that like and subscribe button. This helps us reach more auto enthusiasts just like you. And while replacement isn't simple, Canada wasn't standing still either. It was already recalibrating its export strategy. Carney's calculated pivot, diversify to dominate. Rather than escalate rhetoric publicly, Canadian leadership pursued diversification. Early 2026 reports indicated accelerated efforts to strengthen trade ties beyond the United States, particularly in Asia and Latin America. Mexico emerged as an immediate opportunity, leveraging established rail infrastructure that allows efficient southbound grain movement. China also resurfaced in agricultural discussions amid broader normalization efforts. It is crucial to separate fact from hyperbole. Canada did not permanently freeze wheat shipments to the United States. Instead, it signaled flexibility by reinforcing alternative buyer relationships. Global demand for high-protein wheat remains robust across Southeast Asia, North Africa, and the Middle East. The objective was risk management, not retaliation. By reducing reliance on a single export partner, Canada increased leverage while projecting long-term supply resilience. But diversification abroad inevitably creates political pressure at home, especially in Washington. Washington backlash. Tariffs trigger domestic pressure. Tariffs may be framed as leverage, but domestic consequences often follow. In early 2026, concerns surfaced within the U.S. House regarding aspects of the tariff framework involving Canada. Agriculture occupies politically sensitive ground. American farmers depend heavily on export markets, with Canada and Mexico ranking among top trading partners. When trade tensions intensify, reciprocal market shifts become a real possibility. Wheat operates within a global pricing ecosystem. Once supply channels pivot, regaining lost share can take years. If Canadian producers secure stronger positions in Asian markets, U.S. exporters face stiffer competition in those same regions. Trade disputes rarely produce instant winners. Instead, they reshape long-term positioning. Economic integration means shared consequences, much like integrated manufacturing systems in the automotive industry. And when politics and supply chains collide, consumers are often the ones who feel it next. Inflation shock. Tariffs hit consumer wallets. Food inflation remains one of the most politically sensitive pressure points in North America. Even modest price increases in staples like flour or pasta quickly dominate headlines. While the United States produces enough wheat to satisfy overall demand, specialty imports influence premium blends and certain processed products. When tariffs raise costs at the milling stage, those increases cascade downstream, from bakeries to distributors to supermarket shelves. The transmission effect is straightforward. Higher input costs eventually reach consumers. This is not a nationwide shortage scenario, but it exposes how fragile integrated systems can become under stress. Think of it like an engine's lubrication system. If friction increases at the top, heat builds throughout the entire assembly. Stability keeps costs predictable. Uncertainty introduces volatility. And if this sounds familiar, it's because the automotive industry operates under the exact same supply chain logic. Automotive parallel. Supply chains are strategic engines. For automotive observers and industry watchers, the wheat episode feels strikingly familiar. Swap wheat for lithium, nickel, semiconductors, or aluminum, and the mechanics look nearly identical. Canada supplies potash, aluminum, hydroelectric power, crude oil, and critical minerals, inputs that quietly power North American manufacturing. When trust erodes between trading partners, diversification becomes a defensive strategy. Automakers are already restructuring battery sourcing and component manufacturing to avoid single-country dependency. Canada's wheat pivot mirrors that logic. The lesson isn't about bread, it's about leverage embedded within supply chains. Economic interdependence drives efficiency, but efficiency without redundancy creates exposure. Once alternative sourcing routes are engineered and financed, industries rarely revert fully. That structural evolution may outlast the 2026 tariff standoff itself. Which brings us to the broader strategic question: what does this mean for long-term trade stability? Food security reset. Strategic trade recalibration. At its core, the wheat dispute underscores how food security intersects with national strategy. Both the United States and Canada rank among the world's agricultural heavyweights. Neither benefits from prolonged instability. Yet what we're witnessing resembles a calculated reset. Canada is broadening export relationships beyond a single dominant market. The United States is examining domestic capacity across multiple strategic categories. These actions are not outright confrontation, they're precautionary engineering. But precautionary shifts can permanently alter trade architecture. Once industries lock in new buyers or suppliers, economic gravity subtly shifts. Cross-border wheat trade will likely continue, yet perhaps under a more cautious and calculated framework. The era of automatic reliance appears to be fading, replaced by strategic diversification. And that leads us to the final takeaway. Final verdict: trade leverage meets economic reality. Here's the bottom line. The wheat tensions of 2026 prove that leverage inside an integrated economy is rarely one-directional. Canada showed that diversification reduces exposure. The United States demonstrated that tariff tactics can trigger domestic ripple effects, economic and political alike. No collapse occurred, no knockout blow landed. Instead, both sides recalibrated. For the automotive world, and for the enthusiasts who follow supply chains as closely as horsepower figures, the lesson is unmistakable. Supply chains are strategic assets. Whether we're discussing wheat, aluminum, rare earth magnets, or EV battery cells, reliability now outweighs short-term tactical advantage. Manufacturing thrives on predictability. When predictability erodes, industries redesign their sourcing architecture. So let me ask you, Should North America double down on integration to preserve stability? Or is diversification the smarter hedge in a volatile geopolitical climate? And if wheat can create this level of tension, what happens when electric vehicle supply chains face similar pressure? If you value deep dives like this, subscribe to Piston Pundit to stay ahead of the next vehicle update and industry shift. Drop your thoughts below, and as always, thank you for watching. You can now check out any of the videos on the screen. There's plenty more to explore.